Hello everyone, welcome back. My name is Arias, and today we're going to be talking about Recursion Pharmaceuticals. Recursion has had a string of recent events that all had some really interesting insights and takeaways that I thought would be great to break down here. Before we get into it, this video assumes that you understand who Recursion is and what they do. If not, I made a short introductory video that I'll link below and then come back to this one for some more in-depth insights. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy this type of content, and leave any video suggestions and feedback in the comments below. And without further ado, let's get into it. Let's start off with takeaways from the JPM Healthcare Conference that Recursion participated in back in January. Of course, the first and biggest takeaway was the announcement of a massive deal with Roche and Genentech, which I covered fully in my last video on Recursion. Again, link in the description for that. My next takeaway was from the over there of the business, and this was how they overcame the human biases that often obscure drug companies' ability to look for drugs in the most effective way. Recursion aims to use maps that they are building from biology to allow machine learning models to build hypotheses, the best of which will be selected by human operators, as humans are still pretty good at holistically understanding the effects of disease. For example, if there are two potential treatments, but a chemist looks at one and can tell that it will absolutely have liver toxicity problems, we would clearly select the other potential treatment. Using this combination of machine learning, automation, and humans will allow them to rapidly and inexpensively test and iterate to find the best treatments and ditch the ineffective treatments early, as you can see in these two graphs they showed. In the top graph, Recursion's number of leads atrophies much faster than the industry, having just 14 out of 100 leads make it to the development candidate stage, whereas the industry average has 51 programs still left. This allows them to spend less to get a program to IND that may actually be successful, as Recursion spends 5 to 10 million, while the industry spends on average 20 to 25 million. It also allows Recursion to get to IND much faster, in about 40 months, which is significantly quicker than the industry average of 65 months. CEO Chris Gibson also gave a high-level overview of their plans for their platform. He said that they plan to focus their internal programs on oncology, inflammation and immunology, and rare diseases, where they feel they can economically bring programs to the clinic. However, they plan to partner with other big pharma companies on more complicated diseases that will be more expensive to get to the clinic and successfully commercialize. They have already initiated some of these partnerships, such as the one I referenced earlier with Roche Genentech in the neuroscience space, as well as with Bayer in the fibrosis space, but they will look to make more of these partnerships going forward in other large tractable areas of biology. Continuing on the takeaways from the JPM conference, Gibson emphasized that Recursion is working on diseases that aren't being worked on anywhere else, and that this isn't just by chance, but this is being enabled by design of their system. He highlighted that their partnership with Bayer in fibrosis, saying that there are 12 programs and none of them are so-called Me Too programs, which are just another treatment for something that has already been addressed. Another example is cerebral cavernous malformation, which Recursion will enter phase 2 trials on this year. CCM represents a fairly large commercial opportunity with a prevalence of 360,000 patients in the US and EU5. We'll talk more about how their platforms enables Recursion to be first on a treatment later on. Chris also does a quick rundown of all their programs, which is a little too detailed for this video, but does have some good insights, so I've put the timestamps on the screen and the link will be clearly labeled in the description. Also, let me know if you have any interest in me running through each of these programs individually and perhaps looking at the potential commercial opportunity for each, and I'll make a video on that. He also talked about small molecule manufacturing coming online to help control the timing of their clinical trials. And by help control timing, I'm sure he means accelerate as much as possible. Finally, one of the most interesting things to come from this presentation is that they are making investments to accelerate SAR and ADMET studies, which stand for Structure Activity Relationship and Absorption, Distribution, Metabolism, Elimination, and Toxicity. These are those IND-enabling studies that are required before drugs can go into clinical trials. If Recursion can find a way to successfully accelerate this, it would further improve their speed lead over the rest of the industry that we talked about on the last slide. They are also looking forward into the future and envisioning making investment processes to find a way to accelerate the clinical trial process. These 3 investments that they are making to improve their future prospects are things that I love to hear as an investor. They show that this is a company that is maniacally focused on advancing towards their goals of being a best-in-class drug discovery platform. This is, dare I say it, a Tesla-esque thing, looking for any and all ways to give themselves a better chance at dominant and accelerating success. Next are my takeaways from Chris Gibson's interview with Nat Harooni, who is a solid follow on Twitter if you're interested in genomics companies. First, Chris cited a wealth of population genomics data due to local universities and churches as for why Salt Lake City has been a growing and thriving biotech scene led by Recursion. For some background on him and how he got Recursion started, he was doing his PhD work on the aforementioned CCM. They thought that they had a good target and development had gone well for him and the team, but after 5 months of work, they found it had no effect or even made what they were trying to improve slightly worse. This sort of thing is common in drug discovery because biology is complex. After he had moved on from this work, he was introduced to combining machine learning with phenotyping cells and observed that these machine learning models were really good at picking out targets to further explore. This was the genesis for Recursion, as Gibson and a team got together and in a much shorter time frame developed 2 really promising candidates for CCM, one of which is in the clinic for Recursion at this time. They also talked about how Recursion's obsession with automation allows them to standardize all of their processes. Standardization is important because with humans pipetting, there will always be slight variations and mistakes that will slow the effectiveness of their research. This is a recurring theme with most of my biotech companies like Ginkgo and Beam as well, but Recursion seems to be keeping up with anyone as they have accumulated 13 petabytes of data. That is more data than every feature-length film in every language ever created. This scale and automation makes it much less expensive to run each experiment at about 35 cents per experiment. Their costs are also lowered by just the simple fact of how they are studying their experiments as phenotyping, aka taking pictures of cells, which is 2 to 4 orders of magnitude less expensive than studying genomics or proteomics, which allows Recursion to continue to scale at an accelerating rate. Later in the interview, Gibson again stated that most of their current programs they intend to develop in-house are going to be slightly cheaper to get to the clinic, and they will look to partner for big, more expensive programs. This plan of action will still allow for Recursion to attack major areas of disease and share in that upside, while allowing partners to take much of the risk for this development and commercialization process. Speaking of one of these partnerships, Gibson said that their Roche-Genentech partnership includes a data sharing agreement where both sides will look to utilize each other's data to build a map of neuroscience to go after novel targets in the space. Moving on, he further explained what I was talking about earlier, in that due to their platform, Recursion has the ability to find treatments for ailments that no one else is currently looking to treat in the clinic. They talked about the normal avenue for drug discovery being someone published a scientific paper showing a promising potential pathway to treat a disease, and instantly a bunch of companies jump to the opportunity and rush into the clinic, only to have the pathway either not be good, in which case they most or all fail, which is obviously not a good outcome, or most or all are successful just to have their new development competed away with a bunch of other successful programs for the same candidate. Obviously, Recursion doesn't work that way, as the Recursion OS allows them to make maps of biology and identify new potential pathways to take drugs to market. This juxtaposition is a really key insight onto why Recursion has the opportunity to be a special company going forward. Finally, for this slide, and this is another super interesting topic that was brought up, is Gibson said long-term in 20 or 30 years, they want to give the best treatment for each disease and here's the key part, for each patient. Let's unpack that for a moment. My interpretation of that statement is Recursion wants to cultivate the ability to formulate specific drug formula for each person with each disease. I would imagine that this would entail studying a sample from each person, or at least taking their genome or proteome, to find a specific treatment formulation for their specific situation and permeation of disease. This would be an amazing capability, and is but a pipe dream today as it will require drastic changes to the way drugs are currently approved. But in my opinion, Recursion seems to be in the best position to bring this to reality with their automation prowess and focus on AI-enabled empowerment. This is one of the most exciting possibilities, and as usual, I can't wait to see it all play out. Now, on to the last takeaway slide for the day, and that will be from the SVB Leerink Healthcare Conference. Again, all of these events will be linked in the description below, and I highly encourage you to check them out for yourself. CEO Chris Gibson, making his third appearance, started out by talking about where they are placing their offices. They said that they had opened an office in California and are planning to open 2 more in Toronto and Montreal. Montreal because of its proximity to the Mila Institute and the AI and ML talent that will come from there, and Toronto because it is a growing global city that they think that they can tap global talent due to easier immigration policies. Then they moved on to talk about how their platform is differentiated from other companies similar to them. Gibson said that the main difference is Recursion is a biology-first company, which is in contrast to others being chemistry-first. From my understanding, chemistry first looks to identify potential targets via chemical experiments with minimal interaction in cells, and then looks to see if it really works in the body later on, whereas Recursion starts by looking to the biology for a potential pathway for treatment. Next, the interviewer asked a really good question, and that was essentially, will it get easier to find new targets as this platform matures, or will you exhaust all the obvious options and thus have it become harder to find new candidates? Gibson responded by saying that as time goes on, the more experiments that they will accumulate, and the more connections they will discover. This is a key part of my thesis on Recursion, and I am excited to see this play out. Something that they said that I did not have space for on the slide, but I thought was important enough to mention, is that on the Roche-Genentech partnership, royalties would be in the high single digits. Now, a small note on the FAP program. FAP unfortunately almost universally requires patients to have their colon removed, most of the time in their 20s. Recursion's treatment is to lessen the risk of still developing cancer after the colon has been removed. However, if this is proven to be successful therapy, there is potential for possible use in pushing back the removal of the colon altogether, but that will be explored much later on. Finally, for this slide, Chris closed by summarizing their long-term chances. They currently are a 400-person company, going twice as fast to the clinic for half the cost. If they have similar success rate with each program, this would still be a very valuable company due to the increase in speed and decrease in cost. but if they could have an improved success rate due to their platform, that would be, in my opinion, immensely valuable. Something that would be really interesting to see is if in 3 years from now, how many programs will Recursion have brought to the clinic. They currently have over 40 programs in early development as of last update and growing rapidly. And as we showed earlier on that chart, Recursion has been getting programs to the clinic in less than 3 years. In 3 years, looking at how many programs they have in the clinic, it will be an important indication of both if they can keep their speed advantage up while bringing a bunch of programs into the market and what their success rate is, meaning how many have they weeded out before early development. Before we get to my conclusions, let's talk about what I see as the long-term potential for Recursion. Lately, I've been thinking that Recursion is really only limited by how much suffering is caused by disease to humans. Unfortunately, obviously, that's an almost unquantifiably large number. I love to see that Recursion is willing to spend the money in an effort to attempt to improve their chances of success for their platform. It shows that their management is thinking clearly, is ahead of the curve, and is confident in their technology. They clearly have a ton of white space to grow into, with their TAM being all of human diseases, and I can't wait to see how it all play out going forward. Finally, for my conclusions, Recursion is still full speed ahead towards its goals. The management is thinking very clearly about how to maximize their impact long term via speed. Much of this is having to do with bringing down the cost and speeding up going to the clinic and eventually getting it to market. I think Gibson let slip a major thread in the long-term potential, and that is long-term Recursion might develop the capacity to tailor small molecule drugs to each of the individuals who will be taking them. This can unlock new levels of efficacy for patients as well as growth for Recursion. In my opinion, Recursion has enormous potential, especially trading at a $2 billion market cap. They are currently make up more than 2.5% of my portfolio and about 10% of my non-Tesla holdings. I'm still adding, and as recently as last week, I added to my position by over 15%. Thanks for watching. Please let me know what you think of Recursion in the comments below. Thanks again for watching and have a great rest of your day.